On her 21st birthday, the only wolf who still hadn't awakened was the one everyone believed the moon goddess had forgotten. Among wolves, it wasn't simply unusual, it was unheard of. Most children first heard their wolf's voice sometime between 16 and 18. Some awakened earlier, a few awakened later. But by 21, there had never been another case. That was why the people of Silver Pine Pack no longer called her Arya Everwood. They called her the Empty One. Not always to her face, sometimes in whispers as she passed through the marketplace. Sometimes behind cupped hands during festivals. Sometimes loudly enough to make sure she heard, "There she goes, the wolfless girl." I wonder why the moon goddess rejected her. What alpha would ever choose a Luna without a wolf? Each word landed like another stone inside her heart. She had long since stopped pretending they didn't hurt. The annual Moonlight Festival filled the village square with music and dancing. Young wolves celebrated the beginning of adulthood. Mates were introduced. Future alphas met the daughters of neighboring packs. Laughter echoed beneath strings of silver lanterns. Arya stood quietly near the edge of the celebration. Invisible, just as she preferred. Or at least, that was what she told herself. A cheerful young beta approached. For one hopeful heartbeat, she thought he might ask her to dance. Instead, he smiled awkwardly. "I'm sorry. My friends dared me." Before she could answer, he hurried back toward a group of laughing young wolves. Their laughter wasn't cruel enough to draw punishment, just loud enough to reach her. Arya lowered her eyes. She had become entertainment. Again. Only one person crossed the crowded square toward her. Grandmother Elowyn. Her silver hair shimmered beneath the lantern light as she carried 2 cups of warm berry tea. "I thought you might be cold." Arya accepted the cup with a grateful smile. "I've gotten used to standing alone." Elowyn gently shook her head. "No. You've gotten used to pretending it doesn't matter." Arya stared into the steaming tea. "I keep waiting," she whispered, "for something." "So do I," her grandmother answered softly. "But not every flower blooms in spring. Some wait until autumn. They're no less beautiful." Arya forced a small smile. "You've been saying that since I turned 18. And I'll keep saying it until you're ready to believe it." The old woman's certainty never wavered, even when Arya's did. Late that evening, after the music faded, Arya walked alone to Moon Lake. The water reflected the full moon so perfectly that it seemed another sky rested beneath the surface. As a little girl, she had believed the moon goddess lived there, waiting, watching, listening. She wasn't sure she believed that anymore. She knelt beside the quiet water. "I don't need a mate," she whispered. "I don't even need a wolf." Her voice trembled. "I only want to know why I was born." The wind stirred gently through the trees. No answer came, only silence. Arya closed her eyes. Perhaps silence was the answer. Perhaps she truly had been forgotten. The next morning, a royal messenger thundered into Silver Pine Pack on a foam-covered horse. His uniform was torn. His face was pale with terror. "The great wolf," he gasped, "has broken free." The entire village fell silent. Every wolf knew the stories. The great wolf wasn't merely the Alpha King's companion. It was an ancient guardian, older than kingdoms themselves, powerful enough to destroy armies, wise enough to judge kings. If it had truly gone mad, no pack on the continent would be safe. The messenger looked across the frightened crowd. "The Alpha King has ordered every village to prepare. No one is to travel alone. If the great wolf appears, run." Fear spread through the square like wildfire. Everyone hurried home. Everyone except Arya. For reasons she couldn't explain, her heart wasn't filled with fear. It was filled with something far stranger, a quiet certainty, as though somewhere deep within the endless forest, someone wasn't hunting. Someone was searching. 3 days later, panic reached Silverpine before sunrise. Riders galloped through every street, shouting warnings while frightened families barred their doors. The great wolf had crossed the eastern mountains. 2 villages already lay in ruins. Livestock scattered. Watchtowers splintered. Soldiers reported seeing enormous silver tracks leading deeper into the forest. Nobody knew where the ancient guardian would strike next. The elders gathered everyone inside the meeting hall. "No one leaves alone," the pack alpha ordered. "If the great wolf appears, run immediately." Every face reflected fear. Every voice trembled. Only Arya felt something different. Not courage, curiosity. She could not explain why her heart refused to believe the stories describing the great wolf as nothing more than a monster. That afternoon, distant howls rolled across the hills. Children screamed. Warriors rushed toward the northern gate with spears raised. The ground itself seemed to shake. Then it appeared. The great wolf stepped from the forest. Its silver coat shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. Its amber eyes glowed with ancient intelligence. Scars crossed its massive shoulders like faded lightning. Each breath curled into the cold air. No living wolf had ever looked so magnificent, or so unbearably lonely. The warriors surrounded it. "Loose your arrows!" someone shouted. Archers drew their bows. The great wolf growled. Not wildly, warningly. The sound echoed across the valley. Arya suddenly noticed something everyone else missed. The wolf was limping. Dark blood stained one front leg. It wasn't charging. It was exhausted. She took one hesitant step forward. "Arya!" her grandmother cried. "Stop!" The pack alpha grabbed her arm. "It will kill you." She gently pulled free. "I don't think it wants to." Gasps spread through the crowd. The archers tightened their bowstrings. One frightened soldier released an arrow. The shaft flew straight toward the great wolf. Without thinking, Arya ran. She threw herself between the arrow and the wounded guardian. The arrow struck the ground at her feet. Silence crashed over the village. The great wolf stared at her. She looked back without moving. "I don't know who you are," she whispered, "but I know what fear looks like. And yours doesn't feel like anger." For one endless heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the impossible unfolded. The gigantic wolf slowly lowered its head. It walked toward her without aggression, without menace, without sound. Every warrior stood frozen. The ancient guardian stopped inches away. Its warm breath stirred loose strands of Arya's hair. She expected teeth. Instead, the great wolf gently pressed its forehead against hers. The contact lasted only a moment, yet warmth flooded through her chest, like moonlight pouring into an empty room. Tears filled her eyes for reasons she could not understand. The wolf closed its eyes, almost as though it had finally found someone after centuries of searching. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The entire village watched the impossible unfold before their eyes. Then, far beyond the hills, the sound of galloping horses echoed through the valley. Royal banners appeared between the trees. The Alpha King had arrived. The royal riders entered Silverpine just before sunset. Their black banners snapped sharply in the cold wind. Villagers immediately stepped aside, lowering their heads as the Alpha King's escort thundered through the square. At their center rode Alpha King Lucian Nightshade. His expression remained calm. His silver eyes searched the crowd with practiced precision. He expected destruction. Instead, he found silence. The great wolf stood peacefully in the middle of the village. No growling, no bloodshed, no panic. Only one young woman stood before it. Her hand rested gently against its massive forehead. Lucian's horse stopped abruptly. His own wolf surged violently inside him, not with anger, recognition. It had never reacted this way before. The sensation was so overwhelming that Lucian nearly lost his balance. "What is happening?" Captain Aldrich whispered. Lucian could not answer. His wolf wanted only one thing: to bow. He fought the instinct, failed. Before hundreds of stunned villagers, the Alpha King slowly dismounted. The moment his boots touched the ground, his wolf pushed forward again. Lucian lowered his head, not to the great wolf, to the young woman standing beside it. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The king, he bowed. To her? Arya stared in disbelief. You shouldn't do that. She stepped back. I'm nobody. Lucian slowly lifted his head. My wolf disagrees. The great wolf released a deep, peaceful rumble. For the first time in months, its eyes no longer carried pain, only quiet relief. An elderly voice broke the silence. I warned them. Royal Oracle Seraphine stepped forward from the king's escort. Her white robes brushed the frozen earth as she studied Arya with tear-filled eyes. The prophecy was never about finding a stronger alpha. She smiled softly. It was about finding the one heart the great wolf would trust. Arya shook her head. You're mistaken. I don't even have a wolf. Seraphine's smile widened. No, you have something far older. Captain Aldrich frowned. What does that mean? The oracle turned toward Lucian. There is only one place left that may answer that question. The Moon Temple. Lucian nodded immediately. Prepare the horses. Arya hesitated. I don't belong in a royal temple. The great wolf gently nudged her shoulder. She looked into its ancient amber eyes. For the first time in her life, she felt completely accepted. Grandmother Eowyn stepped beside her. You asked the moon goddess why you were born. She squeezed Arya's hand. Perhaps, she has decided to answer. As the last light faded beyond the mountains, Arya climbed into the royal carriage. The great wolf walked beside it, instead of returning to the palace. Every soldier watched in astonishment. The ancient guardian obeyed no command, yet it willingly followed the quiet young woman everyone had once called the Empty One. Far ahead, the Moon Temple waited, and beneath its oldest stone floors, a forgotten truth had slept for centuries. The Moon Temple stood higher than the clouds. Carved into the face of the northern cliffs, it had watched over wolfkind for thousands of years. Few living wolves had ever crossed its gates. Fewer still had entered its hidden archives. As Arya stepped inside, moonlight spilled through crystal windows, bathing the ancient halls in silver. The great wolf followed quietly behind her. No chains, no guards. For the first time in generations, it walked through the temple as a welcomed guest, rather than a feared weapon. Royal Oracle Seraphine stopped before an enormous stone door covered with faded carvings. No one has opened these records in over 400 years. Lucian placed his hand against the ancient seal. The heavy doors groaned open. Dust drifted into the air. Thousands of scrolls rested upon towering shelves. At the center of the chamber stood a marble pedestal holding a single leather-bound book. Seraphine lifted it with trembling hands. I prayed this day would come. She carefully turned its brittle pages until she reached an illustration unlike any Arya had ever seen. It showed a woman standing peacefully among wolves. Birds rested upon her shoulders. Even bears lay calmly at her feet. Above her floated the image of a silver wolf glowing like moonlight. The heart wolves, Seraphine whispered. They existed before alphas, betas, or omegas. Arya studied the drawing. I've never heard of them. No one has. They were almost erased from history. Lucian stepped closer. What made them different? Seraphine looked at Arya. They possessed no gift for conquest. They could not dominate other wolves. They inspired trust instead. She turned another page. Every creature recognized their spirit. They calmed fear, healed broken bonds, and restored balance wherever hatred had taken root. Arya frowned. Then why did they disappear? The oracle's expression grew solemn. Because kingdoms began valuing strength above compassion. The heart wolves became misunderstood. Many were hunted. The survivors chose to hide. Silence settled across the chamber. Arya lowered her eyes. But why didn't my wolf awaken? Seraphine gently closed the book. Because heart wolves follow a different path. They never awaken through age. They awaken through endurance. Lucian listened carefully. Their power grows with every kindness offered, despite rejection. Every lonely season. Every wound that could have created bitterness, but didn't. Tears welled in Arya's eyes. Every cruel whisper. Every festival spent alone. Every birthday wondering why she was different. None of it had been meaningless. It wasn't a punishment, she whispered. Seraphine smiled. No, it was preparation. The great wolf stepped beside Arya and gently rested its enormous head against her shoulder. Its eyes closed peacefully. Lucian finally understood why the ancient guardian had searched across the kingdom. It had never been looking for the strongest wolf. It had been waiting for the strongest heart. Then the great wolf slowly lifted its head. Its glowing amber eyes settled on Arya. A soft pulse of silver light spread between them. Seraphine inhaled sharply. It's beginning. Arya felt warmth bloom inside her chest. Not painful, not frightening. Almost like a forgotten heartbeat calling to her from somewhere deep within her soul. The great wolf wanted to speak, and somehow, she knew she was finally ready to listen. That night, the Moon Temple stood wrapped in silence. Moonlight poured through the open courtyard, painting the ancient stones in silver. The royal guards remained outside. Even Lucian stayed behind. At Seraphine's request, only Arya and the great wolf entered the sacred moon garden. No chains restrained the ancient guardian. None were needed. The enormous silver wolf walked beside Arya with the quiet patience of an old friend. They stopped beneath the oldest moon tree in the kingdom. Its glowing blossoms drifted gently through the night air. Arya reached out and rested her hand against the great wolf's neck. I'm here, she whispered. You wanted me. The wolf slowly closed its eyes. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then warmth spread through Arya's chest. A voice echoed softly inside her heart. Not loud, not frightening. Ancient. At last. Arya gasped. You can speak? Not with words. With trust. Tears filled her eyes. I don't understand. The great wolf lowered itself onto the grass. Its massive body finally relaxed. For centuries, kings heard only my strength. You heard my pain. Arya's heart ached. They thought you had gone mad. A deep sadness flowed through the bond between them. I was never filled with rage, only loneliness. Images suddenly flooded Arya's mind. Battlefields. Kings riding the great wolf into war. Commands shouted without kindness. Chains forged from silver. Generations treating the guardian as a weapon instead of a living soul. The visions faded. Arya knelt beside the wolf. I'm so sorry. The great wolf gently touched her forehead. You are the first to apologize. A tear slipped down her cheek. No one should carry that much loneliness. The ancient guardian released a peaceful sigh. The sound rolled through the garden like distant thunder. Outside the walls, Lucian looked toward the moonlit courtyard. Captain Aldrich frowned. Should we go inside? Lucian slowly shook his head. No. They've waited far too long for this conversation. Minutes passed. Neither human nor wolf emerged. Then, the temple bells began ringing on their own. Every priest hurried into the courtyard. Seraphine smiled through tears. The bond is complete. Silver light rose above the moon garden. Not wild, not blinding, gentle. Like moonlight reflected upon calm water. When Arya finally stepped through the garden gate, the great wolf walked beside her without hesitation. Not behind her, not ahead of her. Beside her, every guard instinctively lowered their head. Not because Arya commanded them, because something inside their own wolves urged them to honor the peace surrounding her. Lucian met her eyes. You spoke with it. Arya nodded softly. It wasn't searching for someone powerful. She looked down at the great wolf. It was searching for someone willing to listen. The ancient guardian lay peacefully at her feet. Within moments, it drifted into the deepest sleep it had known in centuries. Seraphine smiled. The kingdom believed the great wolf needed a stronger master. She gently shook her head. It only needed someone who finally saw it as family. Lucian looked at Arya with quiet admiration. In that moment, he knew the kingdom had not found its greatest protector through strength. It had found her through compassion, and for the first time in generations. The great wolf slept without fear. By sunrise, the entire kingdom had heard the story. The great wolf had fallen asleep peacefully for the first time in centuries. Not after a battle, not after a spell. After one quiet conversation with a young woman everyone had once called the Empty One. Some called it a miracle, others called it destiny. The royal council called it an opportunity. That afternoon, the council chamber overflowed with nobles, generals, and elders. Arya stood beside Lucian, beneath the stained glass windows. She had never felt more out of place. Councillor Varric rose first. "Your Majesty, the prophecy has been fulfilled." Lucian remained silent. "The Heart Wolf has returned." Varric gestured toward Arya. "By ancient custom, you must claim her as your destined mate." Several council members nodded. "It is the safest choice, the strongest choice." The people expect it. Silence settled over the chamber. Every eye turned toward the Alpha King. Lucian looked at Arya. She lowered her gaze, uncertain what to expect. Then he stood. "My answer is no." The room erupted. "No? Your Majesty, the prophecy." Lucian raised one hand. The chamber became quiet again. For 21 years, she was judged before anyone understood her. He looked around the room. "I will not become the next person to decide her future without asking what she wants." He turned toward Arya. "The moon goddess may have guided us together, but your first choice belongs to you." Arya stared at him. No one had ever offered her that kind of freedom. Not once. Seraphine smiled quietly. The prophecy never demanded marriage. It demanded trust. Weeks became months. Instead of planning a royal wedding, Lucian traveled beside Arya across the kingdom. Together they visited forests where injured wolves recovered. Old hunting grounds became protected sanctuaries. Cruel training arenas were closed forever. Their stone walls were replaced with open meadows where young wolves learned through patience instead of fear. Arya spent hours with frightened pups rejected for awakening late. She listened more than she spoke. Parents soon noticed remarkable changes. Children who once feared their differences began believing they still had a future. The great wolf often wandered freely through the sanctuaries. Young wolves climbed onto its back without fear. The ancient guardian never objected. It had become gentler than anyone imagined possible. One evening, Lucian and Arya watched the sunset from a hill, overlooking the largest sanctuary. Dozens of wolves played below. "They trust you," Lucian said softly. Arya smiled. "They trust kindness." He looked at her. "Do you know when I realized you were extraordinary?" She laughed. "When your wolf bowed to me?" He shook his head. "No." He watched the young wolves racing through the grass. "It was when an entire village mocked you. And you still stepped in front of a wounded stranger." Arya felt warmth spread through her heart, not because of his words, because he had seen the person she had always hoped someone would notice. Far below, bells began ringing from the moon temple. Seraphine looked toward the rising full moon. "The festival begins tomorrow," she whispered. "And so does the final awakening." The festival of the full moon had never drawn such a crowd. Wolves traveled from every kingdom. Some came to celebrate. Others came to witness the woman who had calmed the great wolf. Children carried silver lanterns through the temple gardens. Music drifted across the mountain cliffs. Yet Arya felt strangely quiet inside. She stood beside Lucian beneath the sacred moon tree. "I still don't feel different," she admitted. Lucian smiled gently. You were never waiting to become someone else. You were waiting to discover who you've always been. Before she could answer, the temple bells rang. Once, twice, then 12 times. Every flame around the courtyard suddenly burned silver. Seraphine stepped forward. The moon goddess asks for silence. Thousands obeyed. Even the wind seemed to rest. The great wolf walked into the center of the courtyard. It lowered its head before Arya, not in submission, in welcome. A warm pulse spread through her chest. The same gentle heartbeat she had felt days earlier returned. This time, it grew stronger, brighter. She closed her eyes. "I hear you," she whispered. Silver light surrounded her. It flowed across the stone like liquid moonlight. The crowd watched in breathless silence. A second heartbeat echoed beside her own. Steady, patient, filled with quiet joy. The light gathered into a graceful shape. When it faded, a wolf stood beside Arya. Its fur shimmered like fresh snow beneath a full moon. Its silver eyes reflected kindness instead of power. It was neither enormous nor intimidating, yet every creature in the courtyard instinctively relaxed. Birds fluttered down onto its back. White rabbits emerged from nearby gardens without fear. Children smiled before their parents could stop them. They walked toward the silver wolf. It greeted each tiny hand with a gentle nuzzle. Laughter replaced astonished silence. The great wolf watched the scene. Then, to everyone's amazement, the ancient guardian slowly bowed its head. Seraphine wiped away tears. The heart wolf has returned. The strongest wolf was never the loudest. It was always the one every living soul chose to trust. Arya knelt beside her wolf. She wrapped her arms around its neck. For the first time in her life, she no longer felt incomplete. Lucian walked toward her. No royal decree rested in his hands. No ceremonial bond, only quiet honesty. He offered his hand. "This kingdom spent years waiting for you to find your wolf." He smiled. "We never realized. Your wolf was waiting for the kingdom to become worthy of you." Arya laughed through joyful tears. She placed her hand in his. Not because prophecy demanded it. Not because destiny expected it. Because, somewhere between kindness and trust, love had quietly found them both. Above them, the full moon shone brighter than anyone could remember. And beneath its light, the heart wolf lifted its voice. The great wolf answered. Soon every wolf across the mountains joined the chorus, not as a cry for war, but as a song welcoming compassion home at last. The kingdom changed quietly, not through new laws alone, not through grand victories, but through thousands of small acts of kindness that slowly became stronger than fear. Within a year, every abandoned training ground had become a sanctuary. The heavy chains once used to control frightened wolves were melted down and reforged into bridges, crossing dangerous rivers. Old battlefields bloomed with wildflowers. Children no longer learned that strength meant making others obey. They learned that strength meant helping others feel safe. Arya insisted on visiting every sanctuary herself. She greeted every frightened wolf, every late bloomer, every child convinced they had been forgotten by the moon goddess. She listened before she spoke. Sometimes, that was all someone needed. One afternoon, a nervous 17-year-old girl waited outside the moon temple. Her hands trembled. "My wolf still hasn't awakened," she whispered. "My family says something is wrong with me." Arya smiled and invited her to sit beneath the old moon tree. "Do you know how old I was?" The girl shook her head. 21. Her eyes widened. "You mean, you waited longer than I have?" Arya nodded. "I spent years believing I had been left behind." She gently squeezed the girl's hands. "But the moon goddess was never measuring my life by anyone else's clock." Tears rolled down the young wolf's cheeks. "What if my gift never comes?" Arya looked toward the sanctuary, where her silver heart wolf rested peacefully beside the great wolf. "Then we'll keep walking together until it does." The girl smiled for the first time that day. Word spread quickly across the kingdoms. Young wolves who felt different began traveling to the Moon Temple. Some awakened their wolves, some did not. Every one of them left believing they still had value. Lucian watched Arya welcome each visitor with the same patience she had once longed to receive herself. One evening, he found her feeding an injured wolf pup by the sanctuary lake. "You've been here since sunrise," he said. She laughed softly. He was frightened. "And now? He finally believes he's safe." Lucian smiled. "So do I." She looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" He glanced across the sanctuary. "When I became king, I thought protecting the kingdom meant defeating its enemies." He reached for her hand. "You taught me that the greatest ruler is the one whose people no longer have to live in fear." As the sun disappeared beyond the mountains, wolves of every rank rested peacefully together around the lake. There were no contests, no challenges, no displays of dominance, only quiet trust. The great wolf lifted its head and looked toward Arya. Its ancient eyes no longer carried loneliness, only contentment. After centuries of waiting, it had finally witnessed a kingdom becoming worthy of the heart wolf it had searched so long to find. Many years passed. The Moon Temple became more than a place of worship. It became a place of hope. Young wolves traveled from every corner of the continent, carrying the same quiet fear. Some had awakened late, some believed they were too weak. Others simply felt different from everyone around them. Queen Arya welcomed each one personally. She never stood above them on a throne. Instead, she knelt until they were eye to eye. One autumn afternoon, a frightened little boy clutched his mother's hand outside the sanctuary. "I think the moon goddess forgot me," he whispered. Arya smiled gently. "I used to believe that too." The boy looked up. "You did?" She nodded. "For many years. What happened then?" She glanced toward the peaceful sanctuary. Her silver heart wolf rested beneath the moon tree, while the ancient great wolf slept nearby. "They weren't waiting for me to become stronger," she said softly. "They were waiting for my heart to become ready." The little boy thought quietly. "So, I'm not too late?" Arya brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "There is no such thing as too late. There is only your own journey." The boy smiled. Hope replaced fear inside his eyes. Nearby, Lucian watched the conversation with quiet pride. He had ruled beside Arya for decades. The kingdom had never been safer, not because it possessed the strongest army, but because kindness had become part of its laws, its schools, and its homes. Children no longer competed to become the fiercest wolves. They dreamed of becoming the wisest. The royal oracle Seraphine, now old and silver-haired, stood before the sanctuary entrance one final time. Above the great stone archway, the words King Lucian had chosen decades earlier remained untouched. "Power is not measured by the wolf that can make others kneel. It is measured by the heart that can make even the fiercest wolf feel safe." Travelers often paused to read them. Many left with tears in their eyes. As evening settled across the mountains, wolves gathered around the sanctuary lake. The great wolf slowly rose. It walked to Arya and gently rested its head against her shoulder, just as it had the first day they met. She smiled. "Thank you. Not for choosing her, but for reminding the world that compassion had never been weakness. It had always been the oldest kind of strength." The moon climbed high above the temple. Young wolves lifted their voices in joyful song. The heart wolf answered. So did the great wolf. Their voices echoed across the valleys, carrying a message that would outlive every king and every kingdom. Everyone once believed Arya would never find her wolf. They thought she had been forgotten by fate. They were wrong. She had never been waiting for a wolf. The oldest wolf in history, and the Alpha King himself, had simply been waiting for the woman whose heart was powerful enough to change the meaning of strength forever.